Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Ballet Vero Beach Insights. We are going in the Wayback Machine to a few years ago when all of this used to happen on Zoom. Old school, as some of the kids would say. But I am very, very excited to be here with David Homan, who most of you know is the subject of our program two of our 2025-2026 season, Composer's Notebook. David Homan. David, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I am so honored to be here and for everyone listening, both for this podcast and for my music over the years in partnership with you guys.
So, we're going to get to that. The reason that we are on Zoom today, everyone, is David is up in the Northeast, and while Ballet Vero Beach's budget is growing, we did not have enough to send a film crew to him and keep our food crew here. So we decided the next best thing was a Zoom conversation because I really felt it was important for you all to get to know David, even though if you followed us for any length of time, you know his music well. So, David, I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about your background, early life, growing up, how you got into composing.
Absolutely. And it's not a question I get asked that much because people like the fact I'm a composer, but they don't know what that means. They certainly don't listen, but they love the fact that they've met a composer. So I was really lucky with parents who wanted to support the arts. My dad was an esteemed Shakespearean scholar, theater director, professor at the University of Florida since 1972. He retired 2 years ago. So he taught over 55,000 students all about theater. And he also played jazz piano, which his father, my grandfather, was a jazz musician growing up in street tough Philly in the 30s. So from a musical background and a theater background on my dad's side, my mom was this arts uh, nonprofit executive extraordinaire. So the arts was prevalent in my home. And when I started banging on pots, I started playing on the piano. I started acting. My entire childhood up until I was 12 was completely filled with music. Suzuki trained pianist, and everything I did, my brother did after. It sounds, Adam, like it's a really great story, except for when everyone plays Chopin in the house. You get very tired of Chopin. And I happened to get actually very sick when I was in sixth grade, and I got really tired of Fur Elise and all the rest. So I quit. In an antithetical change of events, this little known band became big called Nirvana. And I went back to my teacher and wanted to learn Smells Like Teen Spirit on piano.
Wow.
And that got me back into music. And that's actually right when I started improvising and composing at age 12.
Wow. So, talk about a little bit before we get into composing and everything like that. Apologies to any FSU fans out there, but we're going to take a little journey to Gainesville. So, if you said your dad was a professor at UF, so I'm assuming growing up in Gainesville and near that campus, how did that shape? You said you were in an arts-rich household, but also being in such an academic environment, how did that shape your childhood and, where you feel you went after that?
I never thought about my world of my comfort in ballet until I started at Bard College and had to take Cunningham and Graham and a lot of those I wouldn't call myself a dancer. I was an actor taking dance. But my first exposure to ballet was my dad's old colleague, Rick Rose, who chaired the dance department. And apologies to all of those FSU fans, but Rick Rose taught Emmett Smith ballet. He credited his footwork based on ballet moves like the pas de chat. And then when he went on Dancing of the Stars years later, he credited Rick Rose as his dance teacher, which made him a dominant mover.
Wow.
And so that the exposure was direct to people directing, at the Hippodrome, the State Theater in the town, the Across Town Repertory Theater, which my parents ended up taking over and running for years. My mom's best friend is a major professor of music at UF, Paul Richards. His wife is my mom's best friend, and Paul has collaborated with my late father on three different operas. My dad is the librettist, and Paul is the composer. So there was no such thing as UF and not UF in my town and in my household. Like my dad was very much it, and as a popular professor who taught Lloyd Clark, who runs and owns the best athletic shoe store and gear place, to the fact every doctor we would go to would be like, "Are you Sid's son?" I had Sid's class, to meeting people who would be friends with my friends' kids who stayed in Gainesville to go, you know, I took your dad's class. My mom took your dad's class. Her father took your dad's class.
Yeah.
All wonderful reasons why I did not go to school there, but also have such a love for the university and the community.
So I was lucky enough to meet your dad once and your mom as well. So I feel like they were, well, mom is and dad was there. They were larger than life personalities, right? So we're going to get to some of your influences for the new work on this program. But my question was, you said you took a little bit of a break from composing, that sort of preteen, teen era, and then Nirvana came into existence, which I am just blown away that that's what brought you back to music, David. Not because, Nirvana wasn't so popular, but that's just not where I would picture it coming from. How did your parents react in terms of you coming back to music and in terms of you sort of deciding that that was your path?
My dad was just enamored with the work and the excellence that would come out of what he saw me do. He was my sharpest critic. Every premiere from Carnegie Hall and American Symphony Orchestra and of an album being recorded, I would hear all the worst of it, all the ideas. He'd be part of the process. And then he would talk about how proud he was of me. And that was a constant, regular, amazing part of my life for my entire life. Even when my dad was in hospice this past fall, I played him the first video that you sent of Black and Red Ribbons, and he was fully cognizant. He watched it with me several times, cried during it, and gave feedback, including, I bet it's going to look a lot better with the costumes. And so, that was a normal for me. It was all normal. My parents, as long as I set my mind to something, really lucky, they let me do it.
That's amazing.
And when I set my mind to it, I'm a very ambitious high achiever. I'm going to join a youth leadership group. I'm going to run a national conference for the March of Dimes. Oh, I did that. I've set out to do things that are much greater than maybe my upbringing might have led me to be or have. And all of it was from a perseverance and a neuroticism from my dad, combined with a direct, easy, calm competence from my mother that made everything that I would be anxious about and not sure I could do, but excel in, suddenly something else I'd already done.
So it's interesting because we have had a professional working relationship almost since the beginning of Ballet Vero Beach. And I don't think, I mean, we've had conversations before, but I don't think we've ever gotten this sort of deep into background and things like that. But I hear all of these parallels, this almost naivete, right? That, oh, I can do it. But after you just sort of have that gumption and well, let's say chutzpah, we'll get to that later too, to just sort of
Fair
like
enough.
put your head down and try. So talk to me a little bit about Bard and then what came after and sort of what your goals with your career started to be.
Yeah. So life is always a series of fortuitous accidents. My larger life father was also the rep for Princeton for the Southeast, which meant if you were applying for Princeton and you thought you were destined to be there, as I thought I was, if they had any questions about it, you'd talk to your father, my father, about it. Except for I didn't get into Princeton. I got into Bard, got into Emory, got into Wake Forest, got into what we will say is the former new college, and a lot of other things, including UF. And I would have been in many different places. And I thought, I'm going to try Bard. They gave me a really great scholarship on tuition exchange. The only problem was I'd never been. So I thought, well, Hudson Valley will be beautiful. I'll deal with the winter. It was cold. And maybe I'll end up in New York from it, being an hour and a half upstate on the Hudson. And it turns out that's exactly what happened. I charted my own course. Bard was tumultuous, to say the least. I was a drama dance major and a music major. And the head of the music department didn't like me because I was an ambitious white man pushing what I wanted to do, even though all the friends who were women or people of color were championing me and in my works. And the head of the theater department, who really had control, not the dance, didn't like me. But because I had the two of them vying against each other and I majored basically in three things, I wrote a major dance work that premiered. I wrote a symphony. I directed a play. I did all of these things while getting into NYU on my own with no support from the school. I met the professor, amazing Romanian man named Dinu Ghetso, who loved me because I could do the one thing I'd learned from my mom, which was organize things really, really well. He brought me in to help run part of the department at Steinhardt. That got me to NYU. Since then, I've been in New York basically since 2001.
So I'd love for you to comment on something that I'm hearing because I encounter a lot of young people, whether they are dancers, whether they want to be actors, musicians, it doesn't matter. And one of the things I am always encouraging them is to really go out and see and do everything within the arts, right?
Mhm.
I get so frustrated when I hear people say, oh, ballet is not my thing. Oh, modern dance is not my thing. And yet they're an artist and they don't see that the creativity has sort of that through line in whatever they do. How has that sort of triple major and also the ability to apparently do all those things fairly well, how has
Except
that,
for dance.
except for dance? I haven't seen David, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I have a feeling I could ask some people if I really wanted to know. So how has that sort of stayed with you, even though you may have chosen composing among other things? How has that stayed with you?
So to think that one should be purely in one's art is a stupid choice for two reasons. You said it delicately. I'll just say it differently because I also ran a global arts foundation supporting thousands of artists, including the likes of the people who became like Ohad Naharin and Itzhak Perlman and all of the best in that world. And I would talk to these artists the same way you would talk to them. And I would say, your network gets you there, your talent sustains you. So when you're in the scene, it cannot just be one scene. And anytime you get an opportunity, it's because of people who vouch for you that by your excellence increase their reputation. But audiences, right? There's performing arts audiences, and there's everyone else who goes to see a movie or goes to a gallery. And when you meet somebody in a theater context or a Broadway context, but they also love Brahms, then they might come hear your work, which is what happened with me. Meeting a lot of people in the dance world led to a lot of Broadway work for me. It led to a lot of symphonic or chamber work because of the connections that I made. But more than that, we might think of this as a visual medium or an auditory medium, and it's a combination of them. But most people are a hybrid of in consuming things visually or orally, and they don't see it as dance or theater or concert. They see it as an experience that they either dabble in and they love or they don't. Right. And so unless you merge all these to have a different perspective, to understand what you are as a creator or performer, you're doing a disservice to yourself and your audience, and you're not building the network you need to make a career work. Because I have Outside of New York, people would think my career was phenomenal. Premieres at Carnegie Hall, symphony orchestras, major string quartets, 7 public albums, a retrospective at Ballet Vero Beach, which is the first,
Right.
maybe the last. But oh my God. And in New York, I'm like this little teeny ant that
Yeah.
people like brush away when they're sweeping the
Right.
streets and the parks
Right.
because it's nothing for making it here. But I'm also a composer who has had all but one of his 220 something works performed
Right.
and recorded, and most of my friends have a massive, now it's just hard drive of music no one's heard.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's to me, it's the way theater professionals or film professionals sometimes describe movie star or Broadway star versus working actor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're doing the thing over and over again. And some people might go, oh my God, you were in this movie, that movie, that. But in Hollywood or New York, it's not that name and lights and famous and all that sort of stuff. So I want you to you sort of hinted when you were talking about how you would talk to those other artists. For folks who have either been a fan of yours through your work at Ballet Vero Beach or people who might be new and just coming to this program for the first time, describe yourself as a composer, as an artist. What gets you excited? What are you trying to put out there?
It's a few things. If I had to describe myself to somebody who hasn't heard my music or barely enough, I would say my music is a combination of Brahms and Bartok. My passion is writing more folk driven, melodic, beautiful to sing melodies, melodies you can sing in the shower. And I love to play with metric rhythms. And therefore, to my Hungarian part of my heritage, like Bela Bartok is the father of modern music, the thing I took the most is I love when there are meters of 7/8 or things that seem so off, but it's just a way to have a different pulse because I have a frenetic, engaging pulse to all of my music.
Right.
If you can't feel the eighth note moving and the eighth note changing, then it's not a work of mine. And everything I've done, everyone has always criticized, saying, "Oh, I love that part. You could make your own piece just from that." And my thought is, yes, I could do that. I could do endless theme and variations, and then my work would be boring. I would rather think of the work in a visual way, even though I'm a composer. I would rather compose in a way that takes somebody on a journey and lets them think they've always known where you've arrived, then keep changing that and have such depth in that. But by the time you get through it, I want to achieve the one thing that also I was told was really stupid to say you wanted as a composer, which was silence. But my best works, when they're performed, people are quiet and it is uncomfortable. Like my string quartet, Einstein's Dreams, which will be the next once my startup gets a little bit more legs and is more better with my finances. I'll say that really poorly. My finances are better from it. I'll record the string quartet again. But at the premiere with the Colorado String Quartet at Bard, it was about a minute and a half till somebody applauded. And I thought I did something wrong. And then I realized, oh my God, they were still in their inner journey. I got them someplace they didn't think they needed to go, but now they are. Let us breathe into, hopefully, the applause after everyone's done.
Yeah. That's so interesting that you say that because you and I have had this conversation about the new work, but I often have this conversation with other choreographers or dancers. I feel myself as a choreographer, I put it to you this way. I said, I'm very sparse. I like to pull back. I like to really fine tune these little bits and moments. And while you would describe your style as having these frenetic bits to it, there's something so supremely focused about your work that it does open the audience up to that sort of journey you're talking about, right? while you could make a work out of this melody or that theme, like you said, I'll say it nicer. You can be as blunt as you want. You said, it'll be boring. I feel like that's where audiences can start to wander, right? With focus. But the way that you bring that slightly unexpected meter playing with it, but also the depth of what you're talking about with making it have a folk-like quality, it allows us as audience members to focus and really take that journey. So I want to ask a question. I don't think it's controversial, but I'm going to ask it anyways. I have been thinking a lot about how my personal Jewish heritage affects what I do as a choreographer. You
Mhm.
mentioned folk. Do you ever think about how that creeps in, the Jewish heritage creeps into what you're doing?
It creeps in without having any training or understanding when I started to compose of what actually that was going to be. But when somebody listens to my music and they know I'm Jewish, they guess Hungary, Romania. That's my heritage. There is something in the way that I emote, the way that I write, which has a Jewishness to it. And I could now, with music theory, analyze it and understand it, but it was just innate.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with this type of music. We were Jewish. Like we as a family, because we were the only Jews in Gainesville at the time, like would show everyone what Hanukkah was by making
It's
latkes.
That is literally my heritage growing up in northwestern Vermont. Like the exact parallel. Like, here, let me bring in the menorah and make you some food and tell you what Hanukkah is.
But since we had been also the only family who'd ever been in China itself, when my dad was invited in the 80s, we would also, for Lunar New Year, show everyone how to make Shanghai style dumplings. And it's not just like Jews and Chinese food. Like we were like authentically Chinese in supporting that culture because it wasn't a very diverse community at that time.
Yeah.
So yes, my Jewish faith and my heritage plays a part in it. I then ran for 14 years as a CEO, the largest Israeli arts foundation called the America Israel Cultural Foundation. So I interacted with thousands of the most amazing artists from all these walks of life. Um, in the recorded works we have at our upcoming retrospective, there are Israelis playing in every one of those pieces because my closest friends, those I learned to trust, those who I learned to love their musicianship, had the same gravitation towards certain stylistic ways to play my melodies, and the best of them, not by accident, were Israeli, Russian Jewish, or American Jewish. Not all,
Amazing.
because you can't in New York, I'll be controversial. You can't in New York have an entire group of musicians without some who are Asian. But the balance is what my family's heritage was, which was like dumplings and latkes.
I
And
love
all of my
that.
music has been premiered by very amazing friends, all of them. Juilliard, Manhattan, MSM, like
Yep.
amazingly trained musicians, all who think my music is really, really easy to play. And then they
Interesting.
play it, and then they realize it's not easy. It's easy to play it. It's not easy to sustain that emotional engagement that
Right.
gets the listener in without stop. Because you can't just play a chord when a chord's supposed to hit. You actually have to hit the chord in a way that resonates the way the chord was literally 3 minutes before. And then you have to change the way that chord is heard because now you're slightly faster. So you can't just auto tune it. You can't just play a note in my music. You have to be fully present at what's next to evoke emotion. And by the time you're done, you're really, really tired, even though you technically could have sight read it. And then I, who am an amateur pianist in comparison, could play all this stuff and I play it and they're like, how did you keep it going for so long that way?
Yeah.
And it's because I don't write technically.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to transition a little bit to the works on the program, because it is one of our composer's notebook programs. So every piece, call it piece, ballet, dance work, features a score by you. We're going to go out of order because I want to go chronologically with your history with BVB. So I first became aware of you as a composer by accident. You were doing a lot of writing for a New York-based dance company called Aerial Rivka Dance, and you all put in an application for the Riverside Dance Festival. And on the video, the first work that I saw, again, we're talking about I experienced your music visually before I knew who you were or anything like that, was Ori, which is on the upcoming program. And I went, what is this? The application stood out so far above all of the other applications that I was getting. And as I got to got to know you and Ariel when the company came down here, I realized how integral what my experience was with Ori was with the music and the dance that went with it. So how did that work come about, and can you place it in the other dance works you had written? Late,
Of course.
middle, early?
So, quit piano, love grunge rock. By the time I get to college, everyone is playing this Nordic band called Apocalyptica.
Okay.
Apocalyptica. Everyone should pause this podcast and Google it because they made Metallica's Black album for four amplified cellos, and it's the most gorgeous thing you will ever hear. You may not like Unforgiven or Enter Sandman or any of the rest, but dear God, there's never been a better hybrid of classical meets rock than what these genius musicians did. And I still listen to it to this day. And so I am at that point, I had been writing for dance starting in college about 10 years. And I had been writing with Ariel Rivka Dance for four. And then I came to Ariel. And for those who don't know, she is my ex-wife. I helped found the dance company. We have two beautiful children together. And we also have these pieces. And Ori is one of her signature works, and it was the one that built our partnership. And it was the first work that she had basically licensed by another company. So we are grateful, Adam, for you for that. So I took my love of four cellos and I wanted to write a work that was just really friggin' cool, energetic. Four cellos just has this, like, I want to hear that. Don't you want to hear what I love the cello? What's four? What happens when they're amplified a little bit with resonance and reverb? And so I hired four cellists. Two of the four were Israeli, and the other two were their closest friends. And I wrote this work over the span of 7 months. The first and second movements were really, really easy to write. And we had just had our daughter, Eva, and I had no time left in life, and I had one hand. And Eva was a squirmy kid who was always in your way, still is, and I love her. And then I had my right hand free as I was holding her squirming in my left. And I was like, I'm going to play something to calm her down. And what is called the 2.5 movement, which is technically the third movement, was me having one hand writing a work that my daughter went from squirmy and movie all around to still. And then as I try to write such epic finales that you've like caught your breath and you've caught your breath and you've caught your breath. And in this work, I still don't understand how the choreography works. Like, I feel like the piece is going to be over and nothing's going to get in the right place. And I'm also thinking, how long did I drag out this ending? Because it's literally like you've gone through it a night and a day and a night and a day. Yes. That all of a sudden, and Ori means my light, was about passage of time and light. Suddenly you're at that next day where the sun rises.
Yep.
And the sun rises slowly. And by the time you're at the end, you feel like you're at the beginning. I've changed, ideally, your sense of passage of time.
Yep.
And that work doesn't feel like 20 something minutes that it is.
Right. And I was just
Eh,
going to say that to our audience. Like you're talking about going and going and going. It easily ranks amongst my top favorite contemporary dance works of all time because it just you get all of that, but you don't feel like you've been sitting for hours or even 20 something minutes.
And part of that is the music because the music doesn't repeat itself. It
Yep.
references, but never
Yep.
fully repeats.
Yep.
And when you get to something to build on something, you feel like it's the evolution you've been waiting for,
Right.
which is not the way that the work I did with Camillo for the Bullies Firebird came about, but the way that we did Red and Black Ribbons, that same intention of the repeat that's not a return, but
Right.
is an evolution has always been part
Right.
of my thinking. All my composition teachers thought it was stupid. They wanted me to close it, to end, to repeat it. And I thought, no, why do you want to say the same thing twice?
And what's so funny, I almost feel like you understand that when you are writing for dance, you need to leave some challenges for the choreographer to figure out,
Mhm.
right? So you were talking about Ori specifically with the non-repeat and the building, and then all of a sudden, and you said you don't even understand how the choreography works itself out. Um, Side note, it was really beautiful to see Catherine and another dancer who did the piece the last time we did it, Lindsay, stage it on the current cast because this is our third time doing it. So we first brought it outside of the Aerial Rivka Dance Rep. We were the first company to do that. And this is our third production of it. So they have this internal working of it. And we zoomed Ariel into a rehearsal. She's like, oh my God, you guys know the work. So I don't know. You don't know. Like you and I would like video and be like, okay, guys, let's try and figure this out. But there's something about getting inside it that reveals both the choreography and the score in this really beautiful way, and it becomes part of the cast. So circling back, I feel like you understand that you kind of have to give a choreographer a couple of things to figure out. I would even call them problems. I love putting roadblocks in my way to try and get to the best artistic product. And I think one of the reasons that it's so satisfying choreographing to your music is there is sort of a mental and cerebral place that you have to get to almost figure it out, right? Especially, and I feel like you're trained in music theory at a very high level, especially, with my minimal knowledge of musical theory, right? So that puts me in such a great creative space to sort of bring something really incredible to the table. So thank you for that. I just wanted to compliment you on that.
You're welcome.
And then I want to move again. We're going out of order, but we're going in sort of your evolution with BVB. So you mentioned the Bullies Firebird. That's the title of the score. We just simply call the work Firebird. And how you and Camilo really worked together to kind of create both the narrative and the score. Most people in our audiences know that Firebird is part of our Stage to Page program. It not only is an amazing work for audiences, general public, but there's so many layers, and we do it for third graders every year. And there's all kinds of curriculum that goes with it about character and perspective. And, it's really one of the reasons that Indian River County is tied for third grade literacy scores, or is second, their third grade literacy scores in the entire state of Florida. But I want you to take me to that process with Camilo and when we approached you and said, hey, yes, we want you, but we want you to take the original Stravinsky score and in my bad musical terminology. I said modernize it. Where did that put you? What was it like working on it with Camilo?
Yeah. So it was a really difficult piece to take on. It's like you tell somebody else you're going to interview them for this next podcast, but you give them a whole new language to speak and they can only say those words. And it's not only a new language, it's one of the most significant composers on the planet's language. And of all of Stravinsky, one of the two weirdest,
Right?
most diabolical that like is known for a couple really important moments. I mean, one of the pieces was like featured in the Winter Olympics in an ice
Yep.
skating.
Yep.
And so everyone knows it. And at the same time, it's really prescriptive and bombastic and like linear. And it just gets weirder and goes and goes and goes and has this massive inferno and then it's over. And as its own work, it's a really incredible work. But the task from Camilla was let's reframe the story. And the thing that comes from my theater background, which is why a composer should study theater or a dancer should study theater, is when you take storytelling into only music or only movement, you leave a lot of interpretation table.
Right.
When you come from a theatrical world of telling a story and the evolution of it, you start to understand what is visual, what is auditory, and what needs to happen. So we rewrote that story. We realized pretty quick, with a few exceptions, there was probably about a third of the music I could integrate in or needed to, and that the rest had to be my own or interpretive of.
Right.
And so that monstrosity of a work, which is 14 movements long and about 45 minutes for a quintet, because if everyone listening supports Ballet Vero Beach, thank you. But we could have used an orchestra for the next
Right.
commission, because I took a orchestral work that is bombastic and loud
Right.
and tried to pretend that a football game with, 24 players can work with five.
Right.
But we did it. And
And
that,
we should say, I mean, I'm saying this as I had nothing to do with it creatively, except like two suggestions that I really think we need to hear a little bit of that melody, this melody. It really works. And I think it works because it's such a departure. So I just wanted to say that before you finish your
thank
thought.
you. Yeah. As I listen through it, and I do listen to it, every couple months, it takes you on a journey and it is more episodic and you feel like you're really in the setting of the stage and where this kid is having a hard time. And then you get into his fantasy.
Yep.
And then you conclude with the same inferno and the work right before it that just anchor you. And then you don't end where it began,
Right.
because the
And
final
that,
movement is
yep.
is different. It's actually a
Yep.
different vocabulary,
Yep.
because now the bullies learned a different language.
And do you know what's so funny? It's funny that you put it that way in the context of the story, and that again, you were able to see that that's what needed to happen. I love the score that in its entirety, but that finale that is uniquely you and goes back to, even though it's a different vocabulary in the score, but really goes back to what makes you as a composer, is my absolute favorite part of the entire score. Because you really, all of a sudden, like you said, it doesn't end where it started. And the character of the bully who is struggling to read has learned a new language, as have the other characters
Mm-hmm.
by the end, the way Camilo tells it. So that shift is so prescient and makes the whole audience go sort of as it ends. It just, I'm getting goosebumps. Sorry. I
And,
mean, I
and
should have
Adam, with
let.
this, right? And this will be an homage to my late father, right? My dad told his family or anyone he knew the same stories over and over again. He even published a book about it, some of his best stories, um, and called A Fish in the Moonlight. And every time my dad would tell you the story that you knew, You wanted to start at the beginning. You wanted to hear the way he told it that day.
Right.
And you wanted to hear the ending, even though you knew the ending, because true storytellers create a work of art that is timeless because you want to go back to be in that time, even if you know it.
Right.
And I attempt to write music that people want to constantly re listen. And as they re listen, they understand maybe I'm not some schlock composer who can write a melody and keep the meter going, because I have what's called non-parallel unison in a lot of my works. And it means, like, when you listen to Ori in particular, if you listen and you train yourself enough to hear the lead cello line, and then you listen several other times and you hear just the lowest cello line, the work is totally different.
Yeah.
And when you hear the middle cello lines, everything starts to strike out differently. The same way if four people were talking at you, you don't usually pick the lead one, but
Right.
the second one's more interesting. In Firebird, what made it so nuanced was each character had different parts of the instruments and different ranges for it.
Right.
And I use what would be that Wagner leitmotif within five instruments to categorize an entire symphony of emotion,
Right.
because it's not an accident that when the bully starts to become more noble, then you hear the French horn more. It's not an accident that final movement, the thing that is the most noble, is obviously the horn. But what you don't know is you heard that first in the cello.
I'm learning things. Okay. Speaking of French horn, so let's talk about the new, almost new work.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about red ribbons, black ribbons, the two pieces that make up my contribution to this program, my first time ever choreographing to your music. I'm calling the piece ribbons, but your compositions are called red ribbons and black ribbons. Talk to me a little bit about those.
So years ago, there was a woman who was a professor at NYU, named Renata. I co-taught a class on composition and choreography with her. So when you tell me my music challenges the choreographer, it's because I had to create like a 12-page worksheet on the difference in the language between choreographers and composers. Because when a choreographer would say this part of the dance has lots of space, and a composer would interpret that as creating lots of space, slower, ethereal, not the same language. The tension between dancers on two different parts of the stage needs music to fill the space in between it. And then when the dancers have no space between them, the music needs to create a bubble around them. And I could describe that in music or in choreography, but when a choreographer says space, it doesn't mean what a composer says. And so Renata asked me to write Black Ribbons. Unfortunately, we never premiered it as a dance, but I went on an artist retreat. I was in the middle of panic attacks and hyper anxious at the time, and it was a trial by fire. I would get through the week on Norton Island in Maine, where I wrote this work. But the choreographer had experienced some incredible loss in her life. I had as well. And we began with this concept. And before I get so dark, I'll just say the impetus for the piece is actually a quote from an Alanis Morissette song I loved. So if anyone listens or wants to write, I'll tell you what, after you listen and come see these premieres. But it was this idea that when everyone lives, we are these beautiful ribbons, colorful and bright, and we slowly descend from the ceiling to the ground. And in some cases, the ribbons reach the ground. In some cases, they get cut short. Some cases, they stall. But what was it like to process 9 different stages of grief, 9 different losses? And what do you conclude from that? What do you end up with that actually has anything of an understanding of what the process of grief should be. This work is dark. It is really hard for the performers to play. Um, there's one melody that repeats itself in a bunch of different ways, and ideally captivating it. I also challenge the listener because I have things go on too long. Because when you're stuck in a grief cycle, as I am now with losing my father in December, it doesn't come quick. And everything in this work, actually, I have sent this to hundreds of people who have experienced loss, even before you asked me to write the first movement of it. And it speaks to them because it makes them sit, as it does with me, sit in our grief. We go through pitter patters of small sections, big sections. The first large section is really long. It's like 4 minutes of a plodding melody, and a melody that just you, even if you try to sing it, you run out of breath.
Right.
Intentional, because you don't have enough breath to get through that whole part of the life. And by the time you get to the ending, everything's as it began. Everything you processed, everything you went through, that massive journey, you went nowhere, because we can't go back in the past to relive or change what somebody we lost was.
Yep.
But what we can do is honor the memory. And whenever the ribbon falls, pick it back up. And so that was that emotional drive of what that first work I wrote while having panic attacks in a small room with a small upright piano in the middle of Maine, where I would go like rowing around this island and like Tom Hanks in Wilson, just like,
right.
Fear of death, let me get through, like Castaway. and then I'd come back and I'd be by myself and I would write. And this work came out. And it premiered in New York. It didn't get the chance to do the dance because Renata got a different job and left New York and couldn't choreograph it. But it has sat with me as one of my most significant works, because most of my work is not popular. This is infamous, but it is literally more people have listened to this than anything else I've ever written, because I know too many people who have lost somebody they love.
And I think that for me, it wasn't that. So we started talking about this and we started talking about expanding on Black Ribbons. I mean, this was a couple years ago. This was almost after, right as soon as Firebird was done. We were talking about like, okay, so David, we brought Ori, Camila's had a chance to work with you. I want a chance to work with you. What do you want to do? And I basically, I pretty much gave you carte blanche. But it's such a tremendous honor for me to be entrusted with something that's so important to you, but also that you decided you wanted to add another ingredient to it. You wanted to add something different. Talk about how you got from Black Ribbons and it being so dark and so heavy, and about how we remember those we've lost, to what is now the prequel to that in this new ballet.
So I love that element of story, Adam. And what I experienced with my dad going through the hospital and hospice was actually what I wrote in a work I recorded 8 months before. Red Ribbons was based on a different idea. As opposed to the morbidity of what you do when you're processing death, what is it like to go through that process of losing somebody, of having the pitter patter of a life and then cut short? What is it like to have that scare and then have everything normalize? How do you find the beauty in the agony of someone's life ending? And don't tell me a single person listening isn't dealing with that or hasn't.
Right.
It is part of our human nature in our world, and we don't talk about it. I do, which is great and horrible, because I have tons of friends and they tell me about their loss and I start crying over my dad left and right, even on podcasts. Right. But I wanted to write a work that got you ready to want Black Ribbons to exist for you. And I wanted to write something that didn't seem fully formed, that didn't seem to have that cohesion, because you don't know how you're going to feel about losing somebody till you lose them. You were focused on the microcosm of your moment being the most important. And in this work, there are some weird stopgaps and things that don't feel like they line up because life doesn't work that way. And there are moments that, and my computer program could never play it this way, but there's these moments of 6/8 that are just these flowy, gorgeous things that sit there. And I don't know how other people are going to interpret it. I don't know how, I saw how you interpreted it in the movement. I thought of it as like somebody's like ethereal body floating up into the sky, then coming back down. Like when you get pulled back from the afterlife, but somebody else isn't going to see it that way. They're going to see that moment of calm as I had for 3 weeks with my dad in hospice, where we thought he'd survive and become out of hospice. A week later, he was gone, but I had that hope. And so, I could describe the music and the tonality and all this, but like none of that matters, because if anyone listening cares, these are profound works that you captured beautifully in dance that just show something about human nature that we have to face.
Right.
And we are our own ribbon, and we carry those we love with us. And we never know how they're going to fall or flutter in the wind, but they will fall. And sometimes we can catch them and sometimes we can't.
So, first of all, thank you for saying that about the work. Before I get into a little bit about how grateful I am to have been able to work on this, I do want to say to our audiences, we're recording this a few weeks before the shows. We are not quite sure about what kind of trigger warning we're going to put on ribbons, because it is very heavy. It is very dark. The score is very personal to David, and how I interpret it is very, very impersonal, very, very personal to me. Do I think that everyone should see it? Absolutely. Do I think that younger viewers might have questions? Absolutely. So proceed a little bit with caution, but I really do think it's probably one of the most important works. It is the most important work I've worked on, and I think it's probably one of the most important works in Ballet Vero Beach's repertoire. So getting back to the work itself and everything we've been talking about today, it just like it kind of hits me like a gut punch that you wrote Red Ribbons and then you sort of experience what you wrote. Because what I remember is you were talking about doing it, and I'm gonna get a little emotional here. If we go back to Eva being in your arms and you playing that and working on Ori, what I remember is a video you sent me of you and your son Max, who when you first came to Vero, Max was a newborn. And so I got to know Max when he was very, very young. And sitting at the piano, improvising a melody that would become the basis for Red Ribbon. So I had that image, though the work turned out nothing like the way I interpreted it, nothing to do with that. There is this beautiful image of continuity and light and hope and sharing and moving through the generations that I will always like. I'm probably one of the only people that's seen that video, but that to me was like, okay, he's really serious. I gotta dial in here. Like this is big.
I love that it's so serious. And to me, it's like, what choice do you have? Your kid's either gonna bang
Right.
on the piano,
Right.
throw something else, because man, does Max love to throw things still. Or
Since he
you
was
pin
an
your
infant.
child down. You pin your
Yeah.
child down. You hope that you're athletic enough to keep them
Right.
intact,
Still, yeah.
and then you get the melody out of your head.
Right.
But for all the darkness of this, right? I do
Right.
not send these works. Now I send people both of this and go, hey, this is about loss. Death
Right.
sucks.
Yeah.
Like, The melodies in that piece, especially the reason I chose the French horn, which is not a normal work to have as a duet.
Right. We should say it's a French horn and piano score. This is not,
Yeah.
this is not something we're encountering every day, though that sound combination.
No, but I think you should. And once
Yes, I
people listen to
agree.
this, like people should have done it more. The heart of that melody, especially in Black Ribbons and the soaring nature of it, is about beauty and hope.
Yep.
It is not guttural and like squashing itself.
Yep.
It is something that as you sing, you run out of breath and you have to take another breath of life to keep singing because somebody's life who meant that much to you should feel that way.
Yeah.
And if you're
And
20 and you're not sure about it, you're telling me you haven't thought about what's going to happen with your parents
yeah.
or what's happening with your grandparents.
Yeah.
And if you are an octogenarian and this is, you're thinking, well, maybe this notebook is the last piece I'll see.
Yeah.
Why not listen to something that's going to give you a better perspective on what you think sits in your life as you watch and listen?
Right.
Because that was our goal.
Yep. And that was, so I talked about the challenges you leave for a choreographer. In Red Ribbons, the first section, that stopping and starting, my naive little brain, the first time you sent me the synthesizer, the computer version, I was like, oh, David, what are you doing to me? And then I heard the recording and I was like, oh, but that's a challenge, right? It's a challenge for a choreographer. It's certainly a challenge for a group of 7 dancers to feel and hear that in the same way, or make the choice to completely depart and just let everybody hear it however they want to hear it. But the challenge of Black Ribbons, in my opinion, is that little nugget of what you told me. You gave me a lot of the backstory and everything like that, but you said ultimately it is about how do we remember the people we have lost? And to me, that's an incredible statement of hope. So I tried to create a work that you could feel on like many different levels, literal, metaphorical, just purely emotional, spiritual. But I think that having that tiny bit of guidance, and I don't know if you knew it was guidance at the time, that just like I don't always do this. I never do this. The ending was the first thing I knew what I wanted. Those last few trailing
Yeah.
off, I knew exactly what I wanted. So that to me was like, okay, I got that, but how are we going to get them there? I do want to, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but aside from telling you all to go to balletverobeach.org and get your tickets for program 2, Composer's Notebook, David Homan. And rumor is he is going to be in the audience for these shows, so you can go and say hi and tell him what you think. I want you to talk a little bit. We've been staring at your background, Orchestrating Connection, because you have not only published a book, but started we won't say new, but a fairly new endeavor that to me is so near and dear and close to my heart and how I try and operate Ballet Vero Beach. Will you tell us a little bit about it before we sign off?
Yeah. So thank you for giving me that space. And for anyone who has listened this long, if you want to prove you did, walk up to me or Adam and say "Purple Monkey Dishwasher,"
Purple
which
Monkey
is
Dishwasher.
it's from The Simpsons, but I will instantly know you got this far in, not just fast forwarding or on 2-speed. So my whole world is finding the resonance between people. I made an entire business, a book, a startup around connection and relevance. It's all about trust. You think about the people that you lost that you'll think about during ribbons. Those are people you spent time with, people that you trusted. So my whole world has been, how do you get people to be more curious and vulnerable? How do you get them to get out of the mindset that they should talk to people who look like them and think like them and be more diverse in their mindset? Apropos your comment, Adam, about those at ballet who only live in the world of ballet.
Yep.
And then how do we live in a world where the structure of interaction is based on action and generosity to people or gratitude to those who are generous to us? Can we be in a world where we feel like this is more of a purposeful and intentional community? Can people who come to this show and are part of your regular listeners and audience not just treat this as they come to the show as something to do on a weekend when they're now in Florida all the time or part of it? Can this rising part of Florida, which used to be a very different part no one had heard of, is now is one of the fastest rising populations of people from all the big cities around the country? Why don't we have more purposeful community, more intention? Do you know how many people won't come up to us who love the work because they think their world is inferior to talk to artists?
Right.
Do you know how many people literally don't understand how little it takes to give an artist hope or to support what they're doing next? And what happens if you take that audacious world to actually share it? Somebody likes this work, or even this, like they like the music, you can get it for 99 cents on iTunes. It's not that
And
expensive.
you could watch us online, like we have watch at homes, like
Yeah.
we do high quality archival videos. Yeah, absolutely.
And what if somebody lost a brother and they sent it to their sister?
Right.
Like, we don't take action even though we know we need it when it comes to us. And my entire passion of connection is trying to get people to be courageous enough to step outside what they need today and do an act of generosity with honor to somebody else, and to finally make more people feel heard and be okay to be vulnerable. Because I am walking into this for anyone listening, knowing that my father, Sidney Homan, it's Sidney Ramsden Homer Jr., the 17th, died on December 1st of last year. And the last work he saw of mine, which because he couldn't make this premiere, although my mom will be in the audience for part of this, was this work we did. His farewell to my creative world, Adam, was the work we did together.
Right. Oh, my friend, give us the title of the book.
The book is Orchestrating Connection: How to Build Purposeful Community in a Tribal World. That you can go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and it can come to you. For my music, a huge amount is on my website, homanmusic.com, but I put a lot of it out there.
Right.
I want a world where people find something in it that's private for them, then they share the reason they felt emotion from it with somebody else. It's never going to make me rich or famous. But that's not the point. And I hope that with our work together, people will honor us by coming. They will honor us by coming because they loved Ori, one of the best works Ariel Grossman ever did. They love the Firebird and they loved what it's done for kids. And now, Adam, they get to come and they get to see you as what they like, the heart and soul of this dance company, to see your work with something so freaking heavy. It's not actually marketable, but at the same time, I'm sorry, but I don't think anyone in Florida I know of is not experiencing loss.
Right.
It's that nature of the state.
Yeah. I think that is a great place to leave it. Again, David, thank you so much. Tickets at balletverobeach.org. Program 2, Composer's Notebook, coming your way in March. It's been a real pleasure, my friend. I feel like I'm just looking forward to what we can do separately next, but also together. And it's always a pleasure to talk to such a passionate artist, give my best to the kids, and can't wait to see Norma at the show. I look forward to long conversations with her. And thanks for kind of going there and going so deep for us.
Absolutely. I appreciate the time and the honor of working with you guys.